Good evening. How are you all? The weather's getting better every day, right? No more bitter cold. In case you're new to this facility, I want to welcome you. My name is Gwendolyn Mayer. I'm the archivist here at the Hudson Library Historical Society, so welcome and thank you for coming this evening. If you're tired of hearing from me, sorry, I went through more commercials. First and foremost, there is a non-winged owl in the back of the room. The author asked me tonight if our owl had wings. So the learned owl is in the back of the room selling Charles's books after the program and before the program, and he will be in the back of the room as opposed to the rotunda for the signing this evening. If you're unfamiliar, in the back of the room there is a little black box next to the door where you go out. It's also next to those fans that need more labeling in those display cases that are going. It's where you can deposit spare dollars or quarters or nickels or $100 bills if you so desire. They help defray the cost of programming, and we accept any and all donations. So thank you in advance. Secondly, I hold this to remind you, actually I think this is third, remember these things? They're either the most wonderful thing in the world or the boon of our existence, right? Please take a moment and mute them or silence them or turn them off. It's very kind of obnoxious to go off while the speaker is speaking, and so I appreciate it if you take a moment and turn them off. One of you has to have the author brochures. Somebody have one of the author brochures? You want to hold it up for me? May I borrow yours? Thank you. In case you're unfamiliar, we have a bevy of authors come to the Hudson Library. You can see them here in this brochure. These brochures are available both at the checkout and in the rotunda. And I don't even remember who's coming here after Charles. I have to look. Forgive me. The Women's Hour, the great fight to win the war in Elaine Weiss. In case you don't know, it's the centennial of the suffrage movement, so we invited her to come and speak. And then in March, we had Edward Watts, another person from California, who was coming to speak about his book, Mortal Republic, How Rome Fell into Tyranny. I have not read this book yet. I'm about to start it, but I'm told by the New York Times that it is a great comparison and contrast to the times of Rome and tyranny and perhaps maybe the political situation of today. So I encourage you all to come to those programs. You can turn and see that there are other programs. There's one about Asian carp and the Asian carp crisis. They are now 4 miles from Lake Erie and infiltrating our Great Lakes, so we're a little concerned. Parkland, birth of a movement. Unfortunately, another topic we have to talk about. Parkland schools, as you all know, and gun safety, and well-behaved women. The world needs more of those, right? Therese Fowler is coming in April. I just finished today Heirs of the Founders by H.W. Brands. He is coming in April. And Andrew McCabe is also coming in April. So those are the April programs. But there are more in these brochures. Please feel free to sign up or register or talk to the reference librarian and we'll get you signed up to come to the program so we have an idea of how many chairs to put out. All that being said, without further ado, there's a gentleman in the room here from all over the place. He was raised in New York, lived in Chicago, and now resides in LA, where there's a lot of traffic. Everyone knows Charles Finch, the author, and his very famous Charles Lennox Victorian Mystery Series. They are very well known. His newest book is The Vanishing Man, the second in a prequel trilogy. Finch is a graduate of Oxford, right? I'm reading upside down without my glasses. And he is a regular critic for the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, and the USA Today. He was a finalist for the 2014 National Book Critics Circle Award for his criticism. By the way, one of our dear friends, Daniel Mendelsohn, who was just here, a couple of months ago, guys, was named one of the editors at the New York Times Book Review yesterday. So, you guys hear me far too much. So, without further ado, Charles, would you like to tell them something?
Thank you so much, Greg. Should I go on this podium? I feel like I'm going to get assassinated if I get up here.
Well, we have a lot of traffic in LA, but no Asian carp yet. So we're ahead of you on that. Sorry, is that another laughing matter? Asian carp. This is the last stop on my book tour. I think I've done Hi Larry. Thank you so much. Can you hear me, everyone? This is the last stop on my book tour, and my publicist said they want you to come to a suburb of Cleveland or a town outside Cleveland. And I said, well, I'm doing 10 cities in 10 days, and I think just I'll pass. And she said, okay, I'll call them. And then she wrote back again and said, can you please go to this Hudson in Cleveland? The lady really says that they have a lot of readers there, and I don't want to get any more emails from her. And so I'm here in Hudson, and I barely know time zone I'm in, and I am exhausted, and I've eaten at Olive Gardens in every state in America. Olive's Garden is maybe the plural. But I'm truly pleased to be somewhere that's so full of wonderful readers, because not everywhere is the same. And I walked up and down Main Street today, and I was really truly blown away by the Learned Owl, which is such a treasure. Not every town has a bookstore like that. And the readers I've spoken to tonight, all of you kind enough to come. So I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful to all of you for coming. And I'll talk a tiny bit about this book, and then I will take some questions maybe. I never know whether to read. Should I read? Maybe. Am I going to read? Can someone see this lady out, please? I'm joking. She can see herself now. I'll maybe read a little bit to start. I went to a new library recently. I moved from Chicago to Los Angeles. I don't know if it's temporary or permanent yet. And my librarian, it's nothing like, this is like a palace among libraries, truly, and you guys are extremely fortunate. But at my very small library, I'm sort of a library rat. I have been since I was 5. I went up to the librarian, and she said, oh, Charles Finch, there's a writer named that. And I said, well, I think that you might mean me. I'm a writer. And she said, no, he's British. And I said, that might be me you're thinking of, because I write about Britain. And she said, no, he's a tall, handsome British guy. So I checked out my books and left. But you could be mistaken for thinking I was British, just because I do write a lot about, if you're new to this series, I do write a lot about England, and these are all set in the Victorian period. And as Gwen sort of explained, I wrote 10 books about Charles Lennox's rise as a detective, and then I sort of ran out of energy a tiny bit. I think I'll pick this up. I'm too tall. Not a problem I'm going to solve right now. I ran out of energy a tiny bit, I think, in terms of where his story was going. He was, by the final book, not to spoil too much, he's married and has a child, and he has sort of a detective agency. And I felt a little sapped of energy, and my very kind editor said, well, why don't you take some extra time and think it over? Maybe you could do like a prequel. And I was like, well, prequels are really stupid, so I'm not going to do that one. But and I called him back like a week later, and I was like, can I do 3 prequels? And he's like, you can do it. He's very, if you're flighty enough, people will let you do anything. So he was like, sure, whatever you say, let's do it. So I thought it would be an interesting opportunity to write about this character at a time in his life when he didn't know whether things were going to work out. I wrote the first book in this series when I was 24, and Charles Lennox was 38, and now I'm 38, and he's 24. So somehow I'm going to get him back into the womb one way or another. But I think what I'm really writing about, or what's dawned on me as I've gone around to all these cities and Olive Gardens, is that what I'm really writing about is my own 20s. I'm a little bit slow-witted, and I think it takes me 10 years or something to process what's happened in my life. And now I'm thinking about the time when I was starting out as a writer and what it felt like not to know whether things would work out. And all my friends had jobs at, very interesting places or were doing interesting stuff. And I was like, gosh, I'm just going to be a failed writer, and I'm going to turn 30, and the world's going to end. And so I wanted to give Charles Lennox, my character, those stakes of feeling kind of young and uncertain and hungry, but also enterprising and energetic. Have I been talking for like 2 hours and everyone's just blacked out? No. I can never tell if I'm talking too much. The answer is almost always yes. Okay, so I'm going to read a tiny bit. I'll tell a quick story, which is just that when I published my first book, I had a big book party, and my whole family came in, which is a lot of cousins and everything like that. And all my friends were there. It was in downtown Manhattan, and I was so excited, and it was a room like this, and I was standing in an elevated thing like this, and I was so proud. I was very, proud. And I opened the first page to read, and I realized only at that moment, after 2 years I spent on this book, that all my characters speak in a British accent. And I was thinking, I don't know how to use a British accent. So I was like, well, shall I just take questions? And everyone's like, no, read. So I tried to fake my way through. And the whole first 2 I could just see people's faces going like, oh no. So now what I do is I choose a page that doesn't have too much of a British dialogue on it. So this might be the most boring part of the book, but I don't care because it's largely exposition. This book is about Lennox. He's trying to discover a lost portrait of William Shakespeare, which is a thing I studied extensively in graduate school to no real financial gain until now. So I'm trying to make some money off of that. And I wanted to really drive home that seeing a duke for him would have been an enormous, I don't know, coup or a big deal, even though he himself is of the aristocratic class. So very early in the book, I want to establish that. Plus, I get a lot of emails that are like, why do you call Lord such and such the Earl of this, but then the Lord of that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. That's just how it's supposed to go. I once got an email. This is the last story I'll tell, I promise. I once got an email. It was from a librarian, and I love librarians, truly, I do. But this librarian, who was from, gosh, was it you? Was she from here? Who was it? Maybe she was from Nebraska. I think she was from Nebraska. And she sent me 7 closely typed pages, and it said, here are the mistakes from your first 9 books. And I actually wasn't angry or anything. I do make mistakes, and I was grateful for her reading, and some people really like to find mistakes. But then the next day, I got an email from her again that said, have you seen to this yet? And I wanted to write back, lady, I can't even remember whether I had dinner last night. Have I seen to this? No, I haven't seen to this. So what I did is I wanted to lay out very clearly what all the titles mean at the sort of start of this book. So, Lennox and his friend Lady Jane are walking down New Bond Street, which is still one of the sort of more shishi, if you've been to London, shopping strips. And they're discussing the Duke. He has this mysterious appointment with the Duke. They spent some time discussing the Duke. A Duke, after all. The whole of the United Kingdom, in its population of 30 million, possessed just 28 such creatures. The least of them was a figure of overpowering consequence. Yet even among their rank were finer gradients, and the man Lennox was shortly to see held one of the 3 or 4 greatest of the dukedoms. Theirs was the highest tier of the nobility, the dukes, first in the land beneath the royal family. Not only that, but in their innermost souls, not a few dukes and duchesses would have pointed to their lineage. The title of duke had come into existence in 1337. And claimed a greater stake in the leadership of Britain than the come-lately family currently chattering around the throne in German accents. A lot of people don't know that Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, didn't speak English when they married. After them it went so. First the marquises, 35 of these, and their wives, the marchionesses. Then earls, and there it became complicated, because the title of earl was oldest of all, originating as long ago as the year 600, historians said, when each shire of England had a jarl, Norse for noble warrior, which was the reason that in England each earl was still entitled to a small crown, a coronet. Many earls in England, including Lady Jane's father, would not have admitted for a second to being beneath a duke, Their wives were called countesses because nobody had ever thought to name them earlesses, which struck many schoolboys memorizing that fact as very stupid. Thereafter it got greatly simpler. Viscounts came next, nearly 100 of these, common as church mice, the poor devils. Finally came barons, last rank in the peerage. And there you'll be at the very top of the heap, said Lady Jane. Well, I doubt he'll make me a duke right on the spot, said Lennox. You're right, probably just a baron or something. And then they talk more in British accents. And then it says, Lennox himself held none of these titles. Just to confuse things, there was still one title left over, and it was here that he entered the picture. Baronets were called Sir, as Lennox's older brother, Sir Edmund, had now been for 18 months. A knight was also called Sir, but his children couldn't inherit the title. It belonged to a sole person and died with him, a great writer, say, or artist, or dear intimate of the Queen's ninth favorite cousin, or Elton John, or, And they added Dame to it, Dame Agatha Christie. That was after this time. All of these gentry taken together with their families numbered not more than 10,000, but Lennox, as the second son even of a very old, landed, and honored baronetcy, was as far down the slopes of the mountain of aristocracy from the Duke of Dorset as the 30 millionth Briton, drunk in a ditch, was from Lennox himself. So that's what lays out the system of the aristocracy in Britain, and why Lennox, who's only 23 or 24, and whose class is constantly criticizing him for doing work. This was a period in which a doctor was considered middle class because they had to put their hands on a patient. So if you use your hands in any way, you're considered beneath the ruling class. And so Lennox, by becoming a detective, is doing something truly eccentric, and now he not only has to do that, but he has to do it with the Duke, and someone who he should fear socially. So I wanted to make it very clear from the outset what that meant. And so that's the Vanishing Knight. I'm actually, normally when I look at these covers after a week on tour or whatever it is, I recoil in horror because I only see the mistakes. It's kind of like, people don't believe me when I say that, but it's true. It's kind of like looking at a Persian rug from the backside, and everyone on the front is saying, what a beautiful carpet, and all you can see is like the threads coming loose, like where you're just hoping to get away with it. But this one I'm actually proud of. So of all the books, I might be proudest of this one. So I hope you will give the chance. Maybe just get it out of the library and instead of buying it, just no, I'm kidding to the later now. I'm sorry. Buy it immediately. And you can always give it away at Christmas or something. And so with that, maybe I'll take a few questions. Is that all right? Yes, of course, Chris. Oh gosh, no, that was the terrible Americans at Oxford who would come back with like a real. But I'm trying to think of what I sometimes catch myself using. Sorry, I can't get this mic at the right height. I catch myself using Britishisms like, Olivia Colman just won the Oscar for, and in England, here we would say, she's from the TV show, whatever it might be, Friends or whatever. And here they say she's off of the TV show. And so I have to say things like that. And sometimes my wife looks at me and is like, are you doing an English thing? And I said, I don't know, what am I doing? Still a man of mystery after all these years. So I think I picked up more idioms than I did an accent. Do you want to hear my accent? No, I'm joking. I'll tell you that the one thing that the word they test you on is water. Water. If you can say that, and I sort of have, I don't know, water. Could I have a glass of water? Absolutely not. The woman in the water. See, I think I messed it up. I swallowed the A too much. So yeah, that's how they can really tell. They have like a national secret password, which is water. You explain it. Anyone else have a question? Yes, of course.
How did you get interested in the Victorian era, and how did you do your research so you don't make those mistakes?
Well, clearly not well. No, it's a great question. How did I get interested in the Victorian era? I've written about this. When I was, I think 11 or 12 for my birthday, I got from my dearly beloved grandmother, who gave me so many of the books that I most love. I got a huge copy of Sherlock Holmes that was had sort of the gold edges and the hardcover and beautiful illustrations. And I was so angry because I was like, well, this should have been a video game. I mean, it's really expensive. You could have gotten me like a baseball glove or whatever. And then 3 or 4 months later, I finally was like, I guess I'll read it. And it was like falling into a malarial fever. I just didn't come up for air for days. And I remember vividly getting to the last page of it and turning back to the first page and just starting. So that it was I just read it continuously for 3 or 4 readings. And, I think things they become sort of subcutaneous at that age, like the music you listen to when you're 12 is supposedly the music that you will always think is the best for the rest of your life. They did a study on that. And so I read that book over and over, and that was sort of a gateway drug to these other writers who I came to love, like P.G. Wodehouse and George Eliot and Elizabeth Gaskell, and I think that everyone in adolescence has some kind of refuge in those books. So when it came time to write these, I really felt at home in that world, even though I'd never been to England. I didn't go to England until after the 3rd book came out. And as for research, I genuinely try not to make mistakes, and it goes through a lot of copy editors and line editors and fact checkers and stuff. But ultimately, to me, what would really be bad is if the atmosphere and the tone were wrong. So I want the dialogue to feel real and the characters to feel real to the time, much more than I care about. I mean, her amendments were very small. They were not, major. I didn't have people driving cars down the street or anything like that. So I make a few bad errors a book, and research, I can't even remember you asked. Did you just ask the time or something? I guess, what do I use? I love to use Victorian newspapers. That's one of my things that I like to do. You can find them online, and there are always these lovelorn letters from sort of like Craigslist listings that are like, I saw you on a train platform wearing a sprig of holly in your hair, and they're so sweet, and then the news stories are all about there's a new country called Canada. It was almost called, one vote decided that it would be Canada rather than Victoria land. So there's that one voter. I always found that astonishing. Or there are ads in them which are an endless source of interest. You'll see ads that are like, things that say no analgesics or anything. The ads will be like, do you have a colicky baby? Try Murphy's oil of whatever now with 2 times the cocaine. And so I'll say oh, okay, well, I guess that's what they were doing for their colicky babies back then. Maybe put that into a line in the book. Does that answer your question? Well, thank you. Yes?
So I'm going to jumble up this question, I'm sure, but you are a sensitive artist, and you will figure out what I meant. I think it's unusual that you picked your protagonist's first name, your first name, and I wondered if that's because a lot of you is in that person, or vice versa even?
I think that's a great question, and my answer will be much more jumbled than there are 2 very distinct answers. The name thing is just a short story, which is that it's an embarrassing short story. I wrote the book, and I was going to publish it under a pseudonym, and I made the detective named Charles as a little Easter egg for my friends, and everything like that. And then a couple months before it came out, my mom called me, and she was literally crying. And she said, "Can you please just publish it under your own name so I can show it to my friends?" And I said, "No." And then I said, "Okay, fine." And so now everyone just thinks I'm this raging narcissist. What's a good girl named Charles? That's the best one. So let's go. So, but the second part of your question is equally opposite, which is. Am I? So I think part of me, since the age of 11 or 12, when I first got that book, has been, a middle-aged British person. And I think he and I share a sort of intermittent melancholy and maybe sensitivity to the people around us, and what are the bad things we share? Maybe lassitude, unwillingness to listen to others sometimes. So yeah, I think that we're very close. I feel very close to him. I feel like he's my peer in the work, if that makes sense. Haruki Murakami has a great analogy, which he says, my protagonists are as if I had a twin, and at birth we were separated, and he went off to Osaka or wherever, Murakami had grown up in Tokyo, and became, an accountant or a lawyer or something. That's my protagonist. And I feel the same way about Charles. He's me, but just a tiny bit of air between us. Does that make sense? Oh gosh, what was my pseudonym? J.K. Rowling? And I published a few books under that name since, but no, I had a whole list, and we were finalizing it. I can't remember. My middle name's Baker, and it was stupid in retrospect. I mean, I didn't have anything great. Any other questions? Yes, of course.
Do you expect to continue the regular service after the prequels?
Oh, thank you for asking. I am, yes, probably. We'll see. I keep saying no, and then they say, do you want more money now? And I say, yes. So I truly love writing these books, but it's kind of a long journey at close quarters with these characters. And there are times when I'm ready to throw all these books across the room, and there are times when I'm like, oh, I can't wait to sit down and work. Yeah, I saw you and you traveled so far. These two people came from Erie, Pennsylvania, and I'm so touched. You could have told me that I was 10 minutes away, and I would have believed you, because I know nothing about, as Gwen repeatedly humiliated me earlier by pointing out, I know nothing about geography, but it's actually 2 hours or more away. So, and Gwen's immediate reaction was, I love your Chuck E. Cheese. So if you're ever in Erie, Pennsylvania, go straight to Chuck E. Cheese.
How do you keep all of your characters straight? Do you have like a list kind of like in your office on your wall that just kind of has like a tree, or because I mean you have a lot of
Yeah, I know. That's a great question. And what I have like a little, I weirdly don't find it difficult to keep track. Isn't that strange? Like do you know like, your freshman year of high school, you sort of like pick up the names of everyone, and it's like you could take a quiz on them and you get like 100? Like I felt like that was my characters. Like I don't know. They sort of work their way into some inner fold of my brain where I just can't forget them. But I do have a little Bible that I keep of like locations I've used, and I try not to have too many stabbings or too many. I tend to forget the crimes. Like I forget like who did what. So people will come up to me and be like, "What was that bag of oranges about?" And I'll be like, "Well, let me tell you, I don't even remember that murder." So whatever you want to think it is exactly right. So the characters I don't have trouble with though. That's an interesting question because I haven't really thought it through. But I have, yes, a list or something like that. Yes.
How were your books received in England, considering you're an American author?
Oh, good question. Very badly. No, I'm kidding. They had a small but ardent fan base in England. So the reason for that is in England they really like very, very dark murder mysteries. That's what they like. So we have this kind of costume drama idea. Everyone turn on your cell phones and text your friends about The Vanishing Man. They like very, I'm trying to think of the writers they love, like Ian Rankin, the Scottish writer, or of our writers who you need to have like 20 bodies to get really any attention there. And it's interesting, this book came out, or not this book, my first book came out when CSI was at sort of its zenith. It was like CSI El Paso. And I was really tired of that as a genre, like of the super bloody, gory, forensic, whatever. And so that's never been my thing. And in some countries, they're very popular in Germany and Russia, but like France and England, nothing. They're not. They want more murder. Yes?
Do you start out in your head what your crime is,
great question. Do I start out in my head with what my crime is? My real life crimes or my book crimes? The book crimes. I'll tell you what I do. I was writing the first book and I was just like floating along on this tide of joy because I was like, oh, these characters are so fun to be with every morning, whatever. And I got to page like 227 and I was like, I have no idea who the murderer is. I have all these suspects. I was just like, oh no, what am I doing? And not an advisable way to write a mystery novel if you're ever given the opportunity. So I pinned it on someone, and I still don't, that book still makes me cringe when I see its cover, because I think, oh, I should have done so much better. But now what I do, it took me 3 or 4 books to figure it out. What I do is I write a little tiny short story of 2 or 3 pages, and an immense amount of, sort of mental time goes into that short story, but it explains exactly what happened. So it'll say like, Jack murdered Jill because Jill did this and hit the thing here, and then that's all the stuff that I omit. So it's kind of like you do the whole puzzle, and then you take out 30 pieces, and you start putting them in one at a time as you go through the story. Does that make sense? That's kind of how I do it now, and it saves me a lot of time. Does it? Yes, I think it does. Yes?
Is it your full-time gig, and how long does it take to write a book?
I'm also an NBA player. And, this is it. Yeah, this is all I got to offer. As Glenn knows, I didn't even know what those things locks are. Did you know what those are in a lake, in a river, lake? Didn't know what a canal was until about 45 minutes ago. Not sure I can name all 5 of those Great Lakes, but I don't know, maybe I could. Is Michigan one? Yes. Erie. Home? Huron. Okay. You guys have named about 30. I'm sure there are only 5. Yes, this is my full-time gig, and what was the other question? Was it about lakes?
How long does it take to write?
Oh, how long does it go? I'm sort of always mentally in the, some part of my brain is always thinking about the book, so I don't view it in terms of like first word to last in terms of the process, because then I'll give myself a few months to research, and like most writers, if I didn't put a hard limit on that, I would just do that for the rest of my life, because that's so fun. I mean, you get to sort of dive into things. And then the actual writing can take any amount of time. It just depends on, this is a very unsatisfying answer. Well, just to take an example, I wrote a book called A Burial at Sea, which is kind of the first in the series that I actually feel somewhat positive about. And at that one, the research took twice as long as all the others combined. It was like 6 months, because it's about a naval ship traveling to Egypt. And then the writing itself took like a month and a half. It just came out because I had done so much research that I was in the world already for all that time. And then other books are the reverse, where I'll do a bit of research and then talk myself through the book. Gwen, am I talking too much? Or is this about lakes? I'm only taking one. Okay. Yeah.
Who is your favorite author, and why does he or she inspire you?
That's a really great and difficult question. Who's my favorite author and why does he or she inspire me? I mean, there are a lot of books that have meant a lot to me, and this author's books are not even necessarily among those top tier, but I would say that the person who I read their work and I cannot believe that they existed because technically they are so gifted is Jane Austen. If you read her book from a craft standpoint as a writer, it's truly astonishing how good she is. I mean, she can create a world and bring you into it and bring a new character into it and make a joke along the way, all in the space that it would take me to describe like an apple. I mean, it's just, she's just, I don't know, there's certain people who are really good at things, like, Rembrandt could really paint, or whatever, and she just could do it. And so I guess I think she's the writer I admire the most. But there's a long list I could give you. I like to read, I'm a huge Dick Francis fan. I feel like he's great. He's right now reading Tony Hillerman, who writes these mystery novels I like, and I love Dorothy Sayers, and I mean, I could do this for a long time. So lock the door, please. Yes?
In terms of your writing, what's your routine like? What approach do you take to writing every day you sit down at the table?
Oh, good question, my routine. I try to block off a couple of hours in the morning. And I used to feel a lot of guilt because then the rest of the day just would sort of drip away. But I have since talked to many, many writers, as you do when you're a writer. You go to conferences and stuff, and you're on panels. And I think the maximum the human brain can write for is maybe 2 or 3 hours, unless you're Stephen King. And then it never turns off. So I do that, and then I spend the rest of the day reading or, writing reviews or other things. But that's what I try to really treasure those few hours in the morning. Oh, no, okay. Yes, of course.
Questions about your covers. For the,
Yeah.
not the prequels, but the
No, it's very important.
series. Did you have a say in creating those? We were really struck by them.
Thank you so much. You know what is funny is that I try to be as flexible as possible with my publisher on every issue. So if anything comes up, like please go to Hudson, I just say yes. And the reason I do that, I'm delighted to be in Hudson, I should say. My fear is that it was going to be me and 9 people at the Learn and Now. Unsubstantiated. Anyway, I do that because I want to save all my ammunition for the covers, because I think it's so important. I think the people who are like, don't judge it by its cover, or cover doesn't matter, I think they're being so silly, because I am a bookstore and library person, and I love covers, so that sort of gives me the power of being nice to everyone all the time, to be like, can we see a 12th version with the yellow a little bit lighter, and you know what I mean? And it's a funny story about this cover, because when my first book came out, they said, what do you want the cover to be? And I sent them this painting, which is by, what's his name? John, I can't believe I don't know off the top of my head. He did all these beautiful, evocative paintings of Victorian England. And they said, that's not commercial enough. And I said, okay. For the prequels, for the first 10 books, they did the 3 objects, and I was very careful. I was like, there's a little too much blood, and so I would tweak them. And then for this book, they said, we found the perfect image for the cover of this book. And then they sent me this, and I opened it, and I was like, oh, 12 years later, vindication. And I emailed them and said, oh yeah, that looks great. Good find, guys. You guys are yeah. Jerks. I hope my pettiness is really coming across.
Why did you go with the 3 items on each cover?
Oh, thank you so much. I wanted from the start for there to be something slightly askew with the cover, but I didn't want like a white chalk outline. And so if you have just 2 things and one is off, it feels, 3 is just one of those magic numbers. C.S. Lewis said the magic number are 3, 7, and 9. And I just felt like if one was off with one of them, it would just be delicate enough to capture the eye. I don't know. I'm not articulating it well. Does that make sense? Yeah, go with it. Yes? Oh, Gwen, are you saying to go stop?
No,
Oh, well, forget that. Yes, please. Barbara, was that your hand? Yeah.
Did you read it out of the garden today and you know the sauerkraut balls?
We didn't tell them about the sauerkraut.
Let me take those in reverse order. No and no. What is it? Does someone have is that one of the Great Lakes? What's the sauerkraut ball? It's what? It's the official hors d'oeuvre of Akron, Ohio. Is it good? What's the thumbs up? Is it a ball? I mean, I hesitate to ask this. Is it a ball of sauerkraut? What else is? Oh, deep fried ball of sauerkraut. I mean, if you said deep fried styrofoam, I'd be like, oh, I was going to try. One funny thing is in Scotland, if you ever go there, as a totally normal dessert item, they sell deep fried Snickers. And I ate one, it was pretty good. I gotta tell you, but it's shocking. I mean, it's like something like 12,000 Okay, so, I'm sorry I haven't had a sauerkraut ball. I'll try to at the airport tomorrow. No, I've always heard the local food is best at the airport. Cleveland Airport? No. Get pierogies? Well, we walked into, I'm going to give you a glimpse behind the curtain here. We walked into I said Hennen's. And we walked in there, and because I wanted to get chapstick, and I saw something that looked really delicious, and I almost stopped and asked Gwen what it was, but she was telling me about the lox. And what was it? It's called like pike cob or something. Yeah, what's that? That's what I want to eat. Forget sauerkraut balls. It's called a paishki? Punchki? I told you I'm being totally serious when I say I'm slow-witted. I really... It's a fat donut? Oh, fat tube thing donut. So it's only around right now? Huh. And it's big. Okay. Well, that's what I'm going to try to locate. It's filled with jelly? Okay. So it's like a jelly donut. But better. Okay. So I'm going to look at the cracker jelly, dozen sauerkraut balls, and 2 pies. Gwen, what was your question? Sorry.
So my friend Tracy Chevalier, she wrote a bunch of books that were based in Europe, and then she finally wrote one about North America after she wrote 15 or 20 books. Have you ever had the desire to write about a different location than England, Scotland, Ireland?
Oh, great question. Yeah, I'm writing a book now. I also write contemporary literary fiction, but I'm very slow at that. So going back to your question all the time, and these I can kind of do one a year, and it's sort of my day job, and I love it. But the literary fiction is much, when you're writing a mystery, you have like a job to do. There's like a body on the ground, and you have to figure out how to pick it up, get it to the corner, and et cetera, et cetera. With literary fiction, as the old doctor said, it's like driving down a road at night. You know there's a road there, but you can only see as far as your headlights. So I published one book of literary fiction called The Last Enchantments, which is about a group of students at Oxford. And I'm working on a second now, which is set in Pennsylvania. So I probably should have known it was next to Ohio. Oh well. Give the librarian something to do out there. Yes?
So where are you on your third last project?
Are you a secret agent from the publisher? They keep asking to see pages, and I'm like, I don't have any pages.
I just
No.
didn't want to hear any more about punchies and the like.
Any more punchy questions? No, I have, I'm in the stage where I'm thinking a lot, and is that laughable? It's essential, I gotta say. You have to think, otherwise you're, so my wife will find scraps of paper that say like, Jones, murderer, question mark, and she'll be like, do you need this paper that says Jones, murderer? And I'll say like, no, you idiot. Or she'll find one that says Johnson, murderer, and I'll be like, you found it! I don't actually call her an idiot, I'm just saying like, I'll have all these scraps of paper around the house, and so I'm in the scraps of paper phase. Yeah. Yes?
Am I right in having read that you were born in Chicago?
Oh, no, I was born in New York and raised there mostly, but I lived in Chicago for 6 years up until August, and may go back. I teach at Northwestern creative writing, and so I go back, to do that, and that's what I'm kind of. Why are you a Chicagoan?
No, I just wondered how these Polish delicacies seem so foreign.
In Chicago? I'm very unaware of my surroundings. In Chicago, people were harping on me for 5 years to eat a hot dog, and finally it didn't change my life or anything. So I'm not, I don't know. I was like, Olive Garden. No, I went to Dave's Pasta Mix Up. That was delicious. So that's my local thing. No sauerkraut. Relax. Maybe one or two more. Do we have time for one or two more? Yes, of course.
When you pitched your first book, was it accepted right away, or did you get action letter?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Sorry for the result.
Oh, no, I don't mind at all. I was very fortunate in that or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, in that I sold my first book, which, writing is a lot like learning it has its sort of like mysterious elements, but it also has its sort of elements of craftsmanship or workmanship. So it's kind of like learning to hit a backhand. Like if you do it 10,000 times, you'll get better at it. And so my first book was accepted right off the bat. I was very fortunate, and I sometimes wish that it hadn't been, and that I'd had to learn a little more. But I was very anxious to get published. You know what I mean? Like when you're 23 and you don't know how things are going to turn out. I remember my mom saying to me, like, "Oh, it's so nice to have the whole, world in front of you, and you can make all these choices." And I was like, "That is nice, but that's kind of like an older person's dream. Like I built that now, but at the time you just want success and you know what I mean." So yeah, I wrote to a lot of agents, and I got an agent and things like that, and just kind of in a downhill slide ever since. Yes. Oh wow, what a great question. My favorite place to do research. My favorite place to do research. I lived in Oxford, England for 3 years, and they have a library called the Bodleian, which is this truly beautiful building. And for a long time I thought that was silly of me, but I now think that it does matter where you do your research, and there is something about sitting in a place that you can look out and see something beautiful, or that people around you are studying. I love that someone is interested in everything. Do you know what I mean? Like the person next to me would be a gemologist, or someone studying, Renaissance heraldry. And I sort of love that feeling of that we were all in our individual carols. You get like a little nice booth, and you have your cup of tea and everything. So I would say there, but I love the British Library, and I love really any library. At the Bodleian as well, you could ask them really outlandish questions, and the librarians just are so used to them. So I would say I need to figure out what, how much. For a long time in England, they drank beer rather than water because it had higher safety standards. So I would say how much alcohol would the average English person drink in a day? And this very stoic librarian would just look at me and say, okay, and then walk away, and then an hour later come back with the perfect book, and I would fall into that book. And so that was my favorite place. I hope that's good. And maybe one more? Yes?
What is your opinion of your best practice?
Oh, wow. That is a question I've never gotten, which you're the first person on this whole tour to ask me a question that I've never received in any variation. What is it? I'm not telling. No, the question is, what is, in my opinion, the best crafted? I think the reason I talk about craft is because it's like my weakness. I think most writers very few writers have both the ability to create a world and characters and atmosphere, and the ability to create a puzzle. And I'm sorry, for me it was always sort of effortless, or not effortless, but it was fun and an adventure to create the characters in the world and the relationships and everything like that. And then I sort of huff and puff my way through the story and try to get it right enough that I won't get too many letters. But I've gotten better at it, and I think the book previous to this, The Woman in the Water, has the most airtight sort of Agatha Christie style. So I tell people to start the series there, because it's first chronologically, and then, I think it has the best mystery. That's the one where I came away from it being like, you really could solve that if you were going along with the detective and trying your hardest and everything. Did someone have one more hand up? I saw it and then I missed it. No? In that case, oh, sure. Yeah. Do you mean for writing or for reading? Oh, interesting. That is another unique question. That's two in a row right at the end. And the answer is yes. I do. I will sometimes, I have a very good friend who's really a brilliant writer, and she writes these, her name is Lisa Geneva. She writes these like medical novels about like a family struck down by like a very rare illness. And what she does is write like, okay, Lisa, you idiot, what were you talking about last time? You were talking about how Hannah had this, and she sort of writes her way into the chapter by doing that, and she also obviously cuts out that part. So I sometimes use that trick, but I will write, it's so embarrassing, I will write poems about, like, if I'm really stuck, I'll write a poem about, like, what is the atmosphere, because poetry is much more associative, and you're using the other side of your brain a little bit, or I'll, like, you know, yeah, I'll write, like, I'll do jottings and stuff like that. I mean, it's very embarrassing insider of baseball, but, and all that stuff is just detritus, you know, it's like, but you need to get into the sort of, like, you need to really dig into the landfill of your mind sometimes, and going into another form does do that. So it's a great question, and the answer is yes. I should do comics? Okay. I can't draw and I don't know anything about comics. Is that going to hold me back? No. Okay. Okay. Well, look out for my comic coming out next year. And sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, I'm truly a library person, and this has been a wonderful place to come. And Gwen could not have been a nicer host, and the Learn It Owl could not be a more warm or welcoming bookstore, and all of you have been so generous. So thank you so much.